Well, welcome everybody to It's Gonna Be Okay with Dr. Roseann. And I have a very special guest today who is a long-term friend of mine, certainly a colleague. She's even come for services and brought her kids here as well.
Yeah.
And she is also one of the co-authors of our book, Brain Under Attack, which we did for the amazing Epidemic Answers. You don't always know it. Welcome, Maria Rickert Hong. Woo!
Thank you for having me.
I love talking to you. You're a genius.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you're always like, everyone always says I'm a walking encyclopedia. You really are a walking encyclopedia. You have a lot of studies memorized. And today we're going to talk about something near and dear to your heart, natural help for sensory processing disorder, which is a condition that affects many people. It by itself, people can have sensory processing disorder, but it's also a co-occurring condition for things like pandas, ADD, certainly autism, and sometimes people have sensory processing disorder sort of temporarily with medical conditions, right?
Sure.
Or as we age. But I'm so excited to talk to you just because we wind up spending so much time catching up in this world, right? We haven't physically seen each other. But let me just tell people a little bit about you. And you are the Education and Media Director of Epidemic Answers, which I'm going to let you talk about what that is, in Documenting Hope. You're a health coach. You're an author of an amazing book called Almost Autism.
That's this one.
That's right there.
The green book.
Wait, it's for any parent that has somebody with sensory processing or autism or ADD or any of these conditions, it should be in your library.
Thank you.
It's a standard. It should absolutely be in your library. It's got great information. And so let's dive into talking about your story, because you have one of the most powerful stories that I always think about in terms of why did you turn to natural help? Like, what happened to you and your family? Share your story for people who don't know it.
Yeah. Well, I was working on Wall Street. I was an equity research analyst for sell-side investment banks, originally for Solomon Smith Barney, Lehman Brothers, Jefferies, and then Callion Securities, which was Credit Lyonnais. And then I got pregnant. I had my first son. We were living in New York City, and I was completely mainstream. I didn't know anything about crunchy granola and natural stuff at all.
I like that you call yourself mainstream, Maria.
Yeah, if you knew me now, right? So, and it really took time to dawn on me what's going on with my son, especially because he had so many health problems and I just wasn't getting good answers from pediatricians. He had projectile vomiting. He developed severe hypotonia at about 3 months, which led to developmental delays. He couldn't sit up on time. When he finally crawled, he crawled backwards at 8 months. And then when he finally crawled forward, it was on his belly. So he did army crawling. And then when he finally did what's called cross-crawling or creeping, he was 19 months old, and he didn't walk until he was 20 months old. He had colic, he had allergies, he had eczema, he was constipated. Oh, let's see. So many things. And then the sensory issues really, really hit, I think, when he was about 3 years old.
And you were going and asking for help.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, he's going to be all right.
Yeah. Here, have this medication. So yes, he was on about 10 different medications, including a prescription for Pediatrician, because he was so failure to thrive. He went from like the 50th percentile in weight down to like the 3rd, and that's pretty severe, mostly because he's throwing up so much. And they're, the pediatricians were like, oh, here, let's cram him full of cheese and mac and cheese and yogurt and
lots of sugar and,
sugar and dairy.
It will stay down,
Yeah. It's like I like cringe now. when I think about
what you did, like what not every, but most parents are like, this is a trusted advisor.
Mhm.
They tell me to do these things.
Yeah.
My friends' kids that, vomit or upset stomachs, they're doing this.
Mhm.
I should do it too.
Yeah. I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And we went through multiple pediatricians because we were in New York City, lived there till my son was almost a year old. Then we moved out here to Connecticut, and that's, where I met you, and was in a group pediatrician practice and switched around a couple of times, and like all sort of the same, everybody's like, oh, he'll grow out of it. Oh, he's just a boy. Oh, he's just this, or we'll take a wait and see approach. And it wasn't really till I had a woman that was helping me out with my kids. And so when she left to go have her own child, that's when the stress really hit it for my older son, and his sensory issues really just went overboard, and it sucked the life out of me.
Was there anything in that time, even though when you look back, like you were kind of band-aiding things, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like he was growing, like to some degree, maybe he got like he went from the 3rd to what? The 10th percentile, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
You were like, oh, it's movement, so you were seeing, because I always, when we go down the rabbit hole, like we're in it, right? And a lot of times there's a little bit of a glimmer, and I think this is why this is such an important conversation, because what makes us suspend belief, but also what makes us be like, put the fire in our belly, right? Which is what we're going to get to right with you in your awakening moment, your moment of holy cow,
my epiphany,
another way, right?
Yeah. So it was when I had my own health problems. And so, because he would wake up like 5 or 6 times a night, and meaning he'd come in my room and wake me up 5 or 6 times a night.
Yeah.
So oh my God, it was awful.
Yeah.
And I had developed really severe adrenal fatigue. And because of that, then I had like all sorts of hormonally related problems, like ovarian cysts and uterine fibroids. And like all of a sudden, cycle went all over the place. It's stress, right? And then bronchitis, which I never had anything like that before. I got shingles twice.
Oh,
yeah, painful. It was painful. Yeah. And seems like there were a couple other things just the middle of the night insomnia, which I think was probably the worst. And so I went to my OBGYN. He gave me Ambien and he gave me Zoloft. I tried it and it just didn't work, and it didn't do anything. And so and doctors hate it when you say this. So I got on to Google and I started.
God for Dr. Google.
Yeah. Googling I don't know, natural sleep remedies or something like this. And I discovered Anne Louise Gittleman, and she had written a book, she's written many, many books. She's a nutritionist, and she wrote a book called something like The Change Before the Change. And she recommended things like B vitamins to help out with the adrenals. And I'm like, oh, interesting. So I started doing that, becoming more open to it. And really helped with my middle of the night insomnia. I went back to my OBGYN. He's like, yeah, whatever. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Wait, what? You want me to take Ambien and Zoloft and you poo-poo the what's wrong with this picture? So it got me digging. I started to see a naturopath for myself. And then when my older son developed really bad asthma, like he almost went to the hospital. It was so bad. I figured,
so scary.
Yeah. I mean, he was on a nebulizer and Zopanex and prednisone and all those kinds of things anyway, but then to have to go to the hospital on top of that, it's like, good grief, what's going on? So after we got him calmed down, brought him to the naturopath, and he said, cut out the dairy. I'm like, what? Because we had a gastroenterologist who was giving him Prevacid. The pediatrician, was giving him Miralax for the constipation. The allergist that we had taken him to at Mount Sinai in New York City, said doesn't have a dairy allergy or any kind of allergy, but what they meant was an IgE allergy, which is anaphylactic, and they don't talk about IgG or IgA sensitivities and intolerances. And so I'm clueless, and I'm
Right.
just like,
So those are sensitivities and tolerance. You can have delayed reactions.
yeah,
So people, that might be new to some people, you know, and
it was huge.
I think people are way more aware of it, but I think there's a whole bunch of parents out there that have no idea what
I'm
those
sure.
things are, right? You know?
Gotta be
Yeah.
tons.
Yeah.
But that was like, other than the for myself, it was cutting out the dairy for my son that was like the biggest trigger. And the next thing that got me into, what else am I not being told? I'm
Yeah.
a research analyst. That's what I like to do.
Right.
So I just kept digging and digging and digging. And anyway, so I cut out the dairy for him. The asthma got better. The constipation got better. The allergies, the eczema, the sensory issues got better. And I had started using a cookbook. I think it's called the Kid Friendly ADHD and Autism Cookbook. And it's mostly gluten-free, dairy-free stuff, but it also has like other potential allergens that foods that kids could be sensitive to, like corn or soy or something like that. And as you work through that, and I was like, oh, so I really got into cooking, and that was kind of fun, and just kept going from there. So
And you got to just see the changes, and boy, did you dig in, like
yes.
you then, became a health coach and got aligned with Epidemic Answers and Documenting Hope. And,
yeah,
your life is devoted to health, not just for your family, but educating others and supporting others around this health journey,
yeah,
and
yeah.
bringing health to your family. And so the diet was the first part for you that you really saw some change in the sensory processing.
You have to do diet.
Yeah, you have to do diet. I mean,
yeah.
Nobody wants to hear it. And a lot of times when people work with me one-on-one,
Yeah.
I say, okay, we're going to, I talk about food in buckets, so 25, 50, 75, and 100. Like, where kind of change you want? You got to make at least 25%. To me, that's swap outs. Like, let's just do some swap outs. 50 is swap outs and removing some of the common allergens. 75 is like, hey, I'm doing almost everything, but I'm not willing to be like the extreme. And sometimes I have people, but most people, when it's mental health, right, or behavioral health, they're too distressed. So I like to say, let's just do some minor things if we can. If we can't, we wait until we calm the brain first.
Right.
Then we start stripping it down. So a lot of my people choose that because they're in a crisis. And I get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to do triage first. But diet is, I think once people realize like, oh, this is so impactful.
It's
you
huge.
can see a difference like that quick,
It's huge.
It's huge. It's huge.
So I in my job at Epidemic Answers, I run a monthly webinar, and I interview people just like you do right here. And I interviewed Dr. Terry Walls last week. I don't know if your listeners know who she is, but amazing. And so she is a medical doctor, MD, who has recovered herself from secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. She was in a tilt reclining wheelchair. She had gone to the Mayo Clinic. They're like, there's nothing we can do for you except for these meds. And she discovered functional medicine.
Yeah.
Basically tweaked the paleo diet to get in like all these nutrients to help with her mitochondrial function or dysfunction. And she's,
she doesn't like, just walk. I've danced with her. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like, yeah. Wow. So, I mean, she's fully mobile. There's no physical, you could never tell she has MS.
Yeah. Like in 18 months, she was biking, she's hiking, she's riding her horse. I don't know if she was doing her Taekwondo again, but like, and then she's doing the research on top of that, which is great.
Yeah.
So it is really, really powerful. And her book is,
I mean, you could cure. Yeah. Is her book the number one book I think ever written on health? It's the Walsh Protocol. Yes. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge book, and that's when you're really getting serious.
Yeah.
What other, and obviously, one of the things that in your journey, right? You have this family health journey. I want to hear more about your natural help. for sensory processing. But over time, I mean, one of the things you did do is you brought your son for neurofeedback. And I would love for you to share people your experience about neurofeedback. And also what was cool is he was functioning very well.
Right.
This wasn't a case where there was extreme difficulties. You were really looking to address some more minor behaviors because you're like me.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to go and leave a stone unturned. Like we're like, okay, let's do this. And I use multiple modalities, things I do, things I go to other people. And it's a way health is our number one priority because mental and physical health, without that, what else matters, right? You know
exactly.
What I mean? So share your experience.
All right. So, and I think what you're saying was that my son was probably in a much better place when we came to see you, just because I had done a lot of that legwork before. So
a lot of things. You had set the foundation.
Yeah, huge foundation.
Right.
So
you
the diet,
body and brain.
Yes. Done the diet, did gluten-free, dairy-free. Then we did the GAPS diet for a few years. And then.
And just for people who don't know what the GAPS diet, GAPS diet is when you remove the most common allergens out of food.
Well, it's a gut healing diet.
Yep.
So it's called, gut and psychology syndrome is what the acronym stands for. And it was developed by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride because she used it to help her son recover from autism.
Right.
It's pretty fascinating because you don't hear about it in the news very much. Anyway, we had done that. We had done some occupational therapy, a little bit of reflex integration therapy, some. And then there were still some other things that were going on. So that's why we came to see you. And here I am thinking, oh, he's recovered from sensory processing disorder. You made a liar out of me. Thank you very much. because you did this really fascinating brain map, the QEEG, and you're like, oh yeah, I can tell where he fell and had the concussion. I can tell where he had the fetal monitor screwed into his brain. I never knew that they did that, and I about threw up when you told me that. But you could tell like he had ADD, right? And he was like classic ADD, which is low beta waves. Is that right?
That's right. Maria is a genius. This is 9 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, And I remember sitting with you and talking to you physically, remember sitting there and sharing that information. It's always surprising, you know, because we don't know how much of that even was the igniter of what you saw, right? How much of the sensory processing, but it doesn't negate like the power of the food and what it did to revive him, because food works at a cellular level. Right. They think it's just something you put in your stomach to give you energy, but it's what powers your entire body. You know, you can cure MS. Hello. You know what I mean? Like, so I was joking today that I'm getting over, I thought it was RSV. I think it's still RSV. And, you know, here I am in my early 50s and the youngins aren't getting over as quickly as me. And I was like, kids, I should not be recovering as quickly as I'm recovering like double the time that you are. Okay. Like as quick. And half the time, I should say. And, you know, it's because of nutrition. Like, what did I do? You know?
Taking out the bad stuff and adding in the good stuff, right?
Only bone broth, only this, you know what I mean? Like
no dairy. Come on,
I don't have
dairy.
It's over. You know what I mean? Like, what is that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know, it makes a big difference. So, and so that brain map gave us some clarity on what were some of the things that were going on, right? You know?
Yeah. And there's a lot of research to back it up too, which I found really impressive. I think it was the American Academy of Pediatrics says that it's a level 1 intervention for ADD, ADHD, and is just as good as medication.
It is. And that still stands today. And you know what's even fascinating about, you know, that's in reference to the neurofeedback in terms of a Q is 89% accurate in diagnosing ADHD, and rating scales are only 47 to 54.
Interesting.
Right. So there is, you know, and a QEEG, there is a science to it.
And an art.
And an art. So now I've done over 10,000 of them. Is that crazy, Maria?
Wow.
Like,
That's awesome.
I mean, you remember how it was like, I had so many people, and then from there, we did some neurofeedback. And what was your experience like when you did neurofeedback for your son? Like what did you see?
I mean, he's a calm kid anyway, so you can't say that it really calmed him down. But I think what had happened with him before we did neurofeedback was that he had sort of internalized a lot of stuff. And that's why you told me that he still has all this sensory stuff. He's just sort of coping with it and figuring out a way, how to deal with it. But afterwards, definitely helped with organization, time management, those kinds of things. So,
and he was a good student.
Attention.
It just helped him to become more efficient, right?
Yeah.
So, whenever
executive function.
Executive functioning. Yeah. And actually a research study just came out that showed that neurofeedback did improve executive functioning.
Oh, cool.
Neuropsych measures of executive functioning. So I was like, I mean, and executive functioning is a set of learned skills, right? But there is an organizational part of your brain that if your brain is more organized, it's just you're gonna, perform better. Whenever somebody says, how do you get all this stuff done? And I'm like, I'm as smart as you, but I'm telling you, I mean, the neurofeedback has made my brain like so organized and so efficient that I literally stop, take a second, put things away, put it here and this and that, whatever. I'm not saying at home. That's Marcy, my housekeeper, takes care of that. But it's so that I can do fun stuff with my kids and I don't have to do it. But it does give you a clarity and an efficiency in processing in your brain. And the research shows that it improves processing speed.
And so what you talk about, talking about the different parts of the brain, right? Because your big thing is about calming the brain, which is what neurofeedback does. And so it's hard to tell people. It's like, you got to get to the hindbrain first, and you got to get yourself out of fight or flight for this part of your brain to start working.
That's right. And, and I think it's hard for people to realize that they're wonderful children in these beautiful homes, even when you're providing great food, that your child could be distressed. But could be sensory. It could be a classroom environment. It could be expectations,
It could be faulty vision processing.
Absolutely.
Faulty auditory processing. You could have retained reflexes that are causing all sorts of anxiety and not really even being seen.
Absolutely. And, anxiety is so internal. And so many of our bright kids, they're people pleasers. They want to do the right thing. And they may, you're just not going to see it in the way that you think you're going to see it. Everyone always has an expectation that there's a full breakdown. When a full breakdown happens, you're in trouble. It's very serious.
Gone way too far.
These things linger for years. And sometimes the breakdown doesn't happen until college, and that's not what you want. And then you look back and you're like, oh, yeah. But, I remember that change, that improvement, and it's years later, and he continued to do very well.
Yeah. He's a senior in high school now.
Oh my God. I can't even believe it.
We're going to be finalizing college applications, I think, next week, if we can get his teacher to finally write the letter of recommendation. But wow.
Well, wow. How did that happen?
I know.
That was a long time ago too. So, what would you say to people that were considering neurofeedback? What would you say to people as an option for in the case of sensory processing or other issues? Because I know you're so familiar, but you're really your area of expertise and how you help families around sensory processing. What would you say to a parent who's considering using neurofeedback as a natural solution for sensory processing?
Yeah, it is a tool. I'm not going to say it's the only tool. I never say that. I think you know that about me. There's no silver bullet for any of this. Even diet. I mean, you got to do the diet, and diet will often get you a long way. So what I talk about is that you have to sort of heal the body internally, get the diet going correctly and the correct nutritional deficiencies, but then you have to rewire the body to the brain.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But I would also say vision therapy is another part. Auditory therapy, reflex integration could be a part.
What do you, and so, because this is really about natural help for sensory processing, what what are some of your favorite things beyond diet that you just listed, right? Some of the things that people have used.
All of them.
Fan,
I can't rank them. Sorry.
No, not ranking them. But
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of occupational therapy for sensory processing.
Yes,
I have found it depends on who you go to.
Yeah.
But I have found it to be very, very helpful for reorganizing and managing the stimuli that's coming to you.
It's just the problem is that most occupational therapy therapists don't do reflex integration as a fundamental part, which honestly, I feel like that should be done first before you start doing all this sensory integration.
Can you just give a quick explanation of what that is? Because I don't think most people know what that is. Yeah.
So there's basically a blueprint for your kid that's just sort of genetically encoded into who we are. So as a fetus will have a blueprint for certain neurological movements, I guess, to emerge, and then to be inhibited. And that's just part of the process of development. So even during birth, they play a huge role. So mothers who had a cesarean delivery will often have kids that have problems with retained reflexes, because there are certain movements that need to occur as that baby is going down the birth canal. That's one part. But then even after birth, and I think it's up to, I'm not real sure, I should know, but up to 12 months, maybe 18 months or so, some of these movements should emerge and then disappear. And so what you have when you have kids with neurodevelopmental disorders, autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, learning disabilities, dyslexia, could be pandas too, is that a lot of these kids have retained reflexes, meaning that they emerged, but they just never got,
reconnected.
Yeah, reconnected into the body. And then so you're sort of left hanging developmentally. And that's where you can have problems with attention and coordination and organization, your executive function skills. It's really fascinating to read up on.
It is deeply fascinating.
Yeah.
Really, in every area of treatment, there's things that help you to reconnect at a deeper level, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think of neurofeedback like that, when the nervous system is, to me, it's just about a dysregulated nervous system. Sometimes you're overstimulated, sometimes you're understimulated, sometimes you're both, but it works at that very base level to create a new level of regulation within the nervous system and the brain. And primitive reflexes helps to reconnect these reflexes that through that birth process and early process should have been supported, but somehow didn't happen, right?
Right. So when I told you about my son who crawled backwards and then crawled on his stomach, that's a developmental delay. Pediatricians were like, oh, don't worry, it's no problem. He's a boy, whatever. It's a problem. When a baby crawls, a baby should be crawling on hands and knees.
Absolutely.
It's called creeping.
Yeah.
If that doesn't happen, then the neck and the brain are not wired correctly to the rest of the body.
Parts of the brain don't develop. I can tell.
Yes.
If somebody hasn't crawled, I can see it in their brain map. The area.
That's so interesting.
So I will say, did your child didn't crawl, right? And they're like,
how'd you know that?
and you literally can see it in this part of their brain that did not develop. So, every early developmental part, interaction, things that your child is supposed to be doing, these are all brain developers. And in the same way that we're having this conversation about natural help for sensory processing disorder, these natural things go in and reset and support the brain. And I think people don't realize, everything from, I say this all the time, even smiling at somebody causes neurotransmitters to fire in the brain. Humor causes neurotransmitters to fire in the brain. Exercise, I know avocado causes, and dark chocolate causes my brain to get a lot of neurotransmitters going. But we have so much power. And I think the beauty of this conversation, even though we're talking mostly about natural, solutions for sensory processing, is that, what I aim to do is not just be a resource for parents, but to empower them to be the absolute resource for their child. And your story is this, you were like, as you said, you were this Wall Streeter, you were doing exactly what people told you. And, it seemed like things were okay. But then once you had your own health journey, you were like, click, 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 click.
Yeah.
This isn't okay. And if you didn't do this, your book is about your kids would probably have autism.
Yeah. Especially my older son, for sure.
Yeah. And you changed that. And I think that I hope somebody who is listening or watching, their mind is blown by that possibility that what you did as this mama bear, like, ain't happening on my watch, and and how much you changed the path of your life. And, you're also married to a very traditional person who has supported you, but hasn't always, I think that's a part of this too, that like lets you, help the boys, but it's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of conversations about, what it is. And I think that's the standard.
It is the standard. As a health coach, I will tell you that, like, most husbands are not on board with this. They're like, I'm spending all this money and they want a guaranteed return. It's like, it's not guaranteed, but I will say that just about every intervention that we did made a difference. Some more than others. It's not going to be the same for every kid. Every kid is different. So
and you can't go wrong with diet. People sometimes are like, I'm not, I think the other part of this is like, what's your expectation and what's real, right? So like people, somebody recently is angry at me about their child's depression not going away in like 2 months. And I'm like, hold on.
How long did it take?
You had it for
how many years?
You know what I mean? And they're 17, So, you have to have expectations, and there was never a promise of that, but there was also a lot of improvement, but in their mind, because it wasn't gone, it was bad. So they focused on the gaps, not the gain. And so you've really got to start changing your mindsets, because I was using the analogy of the mountains. We all want to get to the summit, but you have to go to the base camps first. And you should stop and look at where you are, and it's just not easy. And we're both moms with kids who've had stuff at different times, and they're all doing great. We're also the mother of boys, 2 boys, but my final question for you is, what would you say to a parent who is considering, natural solutions? Like, what's the one thing you wish they knew about natural help?
Well, I wish that they knew that, I hate to say this, but that a lot of pediatricians just don't know about this. So
it's true.
I mean, you're going to have to do your own research on top of that and work with your pediatrician. However, if your pediatrician is not willing to work with you, then go find another one. But a naturopath is an excellent way to start, or a functional medicine practitioner, all great places to start. You can work with them in conjunction with your pediatrician, because, you still do need to have a pediatrician for most things.
So. And I think that, that's really important advice. Like, your naturopath, I mean, I happen to have a functional, of course, family doctor. But for years I went to a standard pediatrician, which we only went once about every 3 years. And then we just went to naturopath. So, but I don't think most pediatricians would allow that, but, Roseann. So, but I think that you can have your own resources and you can be in charge of that. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for what you bring to so many people, because you're part of this amazing organization. You can go to epidemicanswers.org, documentinghope.com. I've already had
exciting stuff there. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are doing exciting stuff. You're really They're doing research at Documenting Hope. Epidemic Answers is just like, not just on a mission to help parents, but also to, they have a list of providers that have been vetted to some degree, but they're there. And, you know, it's a great, great resource. It's one of my favorite organizations. You know,
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
and you were on our board for.
I was on your board.
Yeah.
We wrote the book.
Yes, we did. Brain Under Attack. Yes.
For anybody that thinks they might have a child with PANS and pandas, it's a great book. And even if you don't think your child has PANS and pandas, it's a great book about how to heal from infectious disease or anything that is pulling you down, gut, brain components. It's awesome. Thank you so much for your time here, Maria. I always love talking to you, and you're just such a wealth of knowledge. Every time I hear you talk, I learn. So honestly, so thank you. So as you know, for everybody who knows me, who doesn't, if you're not in our Facebook group, you can go to drroseann.com/group. And as I always say, wherever you are on the journey is exactly where you need to be, but you just need to take one step and be consistent with it to create change.